Welcome back to Nighttime History. Tonight we walk the ancient roads that connected medieval monasteries across Europe, feeling the worn stone beneath our feet and hearing the distant bells that guided pilgrims and monks between these sacred havens. Thank you for joining us on this peaceful journey through time. Settle back into your pillows, let your breathing slow, and allow us to transport you to a world where prayer bells marked the hours and every step was a meditation. The first light of dawn filters through the narrow window of your cell. The stone walls around you hold the chill of the early morning, and you can hear the soft shuffle of sandaled feet in the corridor outside. Brother Thomas is already awake, gathering his simple belongings for the journey ahead. Today you will walk from this monastery to another, carrying messages and supplies along paths that have been travelled for centuries. You reach for your rough woolen habit, still damp from yesterday's washing. The fabric scratches against your skin as you pull it over your head, a familiar reminder of the simple life you have chosen. Your leather belt, worn smooth by countless hands before yours, circles your waist. Attached to it hangs a small leather pouch containing a few coins, some dried bread, and a wooden cross worn smooth by worried fingers. Most people think medieval monks rarely left their monasteries, but actually, they travelled constantly. They carried letters between abbots, transported precious manuscripts, and maintained the vast networks that connected religious communities across hundreds of miles. Some monks spent more time on the road than in their cells. The bell tower rings prime, the first prayer of the day. You join the other travellers in the chapel, your voices blending in the ancient Latin words that have echoed off these stones for generations. The chant fills the cold air with warmth, and you feel the familiar peace that comes with surrendering your individual voice to something larger. After prayers, you break your fast with the others. Thick porridge made from barley sits heavy in your wooden bowl, sweetened with honey from the monastery's own hives. The bread is dark and dense, made from rye flour ground in the monastery's mill. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, knowing it may be hours before you taste food again. Brother Thomas unfolds the map drawn on parchment, its surface yellow with age and soft from countless handlings. The route is marked not with miles, but with the locations of churches and shrines where you can stop to pray. Each mark represents roughly 3 hours of walking, the natural rhythm that has evolved over generations of travellers. You step outside into the crisp morning air. The courtyard is alive with quiet activity as other monks tend to their morning duties. Some feed the chickens that peck between the cobblestones. Others draw water from the deep well at the courtyard's centre, the rope creaking as the wooden bucket descends into darkness. The monastery gates stand open, their heavy oak timbers reinforced with iron bands. These gates have protected this community for 2 centuries, but now they welcome you into the wider world. You pause at the threshold, touching the carved stone cross above the entrance, and whisper a prayer for safe travels. The road stretches ahead, a ribbon of packed earth worn smooth by centuries of feet, hooves, and cartwheels. This particular path began as a Roman road, built with layers of stone and gravel that still provide solid footing after 1,000 years. You can see the remains of the original construction, where recent rains have washed away the accumulated soil of centuries. Your feet find the walking rhythm quickly. Left foot, right foot, the steady pace that will carry you 12 to 15 miles before the sun reaches its peak. The leather of your sandals, softened by months of wear, moulds perfectly to your feet. Each step creates a soft whisper against the earth, joining with Brother Thomas's footsteps to create a quiet percussion that matches your breathing. The landscape around you awakens as you walk. Mist rises from the valleys below, and you catch glimpses of farmers already at work in their fields. They pause in their labours to offer a blessing as you pass, crossing themselves and bowing their heads slightly. These encounters remind you that the world beyond the monastery walls is full of people who share your faith, even if they cannot share your calling. You pass through a small village where smoke rises from thatched roofs and dogs bark at your approach. Children peek around doorways, curious about these travelling monks. Their mothers emerge to offer you water from their wells, a kindness that costs them nothing but means everything to a traveller. The sun climbs higher, and you begin to feel its warmth on your shoulders. Brother Thomas points to a small stone marker beside the road, carved with a simple cross. These markers appear every few miles, placed by monks generations ago to guide travellers and mark safe distances for a day's journey. Let us stop here for a moment as we continue along this ancient path. If you are finding peace in tonight's journey through medieval history, we invite you to join our community of nighttime travellers by subscribing to Nighttime History and turning on notifications for new episodes. A gentle like helps support our channel and lets us know you are enjoying these peaceful explorations of the past. We would love to hear in the comments where you are settling into sleep tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. Your presence makes these journeys more meaningful. Now, let us continue walking toward our destination, feeling the rhythm of prayer that shapes each step of this sacred journey. The bells of Terce ring out from the monastery you left behind, their bronze voices carrying across the countryside to remind all who hear them that it is time for the third prayer of the day. You pause your walking, turn toward the sound and join Brother Thomas in the familiar words. Other travellers on the road stop as well, creating a moment of shared reverence that transforms the dusty path into a temporary chapel. This practice of stopping for prayer every 3 hours shapes the entire rhythm of medieval travel. Most people think monks hurried between destinations like modern travellers, but actually these regular prayer breaks meant that journeys unfolded in a completely different relationship with time. Distance was measured not in miles per hour, but in prayers per day. As you resume walking, you notice how your breathing has synchronized with your steps. 4 steps for each inhalation, 4 steps for each exhalation, creating a natural meditation that makes the miles pass without strain. This breathing pattern was taught to you by older monks who learned it from their elders, a technique passed down through generations of travellers who understood that the journey itself could be a form of prayer. The road begins to climb toward a ridge, and you feel your heart working harder against the slope. Your breath comes quicker now, but still maintains its rhythm. Brother Thomas, walking slightly ahead, seems unaffected by the incline. His years of travel have made his body a perfectly calibrated machine for covering ground, neither hurrying nor lagging, maintaining the steady pace that will carry him safely to journey's end. At the top of the ridge, you pause to catch your breath and survey the landscape spread below. Fields of green barley wave in the morning breeze, punctuated by the darker green of woodlands and the silver threads of streams winding through valleys. In the distance, perhaps 8 miles away, you can see the tower of your destination monastery rising above the trees. The descent is easier on your lungs, but harder on your feet. The downward slope puts pressure on your toes, and you feel grateful for the thick calluses that months of this life have built. You pass a small shrine built into the hillside, its stone walls blackened by centuries of candle smoke. Someone has left fresh wildflowers at the feet of the carved saint, and you add your own silent prayer to the countless others offered at this spot. Halfway down the hill, you encounter other travelers moving in the opposite direction. Two monks from the monastery you are approaching walk with measured steps toward the community you left at dawn. They pause to exchange news and blessings, creating a brief moment of fellowship on the lonely road. One carries a leather satchel bulging with correspondence, letters that will maintain the invisible threads connecting monasteries across the known world. The road levels out as you enter a valley, and you can hear water running somewhere nearby. Brother Thomas leads you off the main path toward the sound, and you discover a spring bubbling up from beneath a cluster of oak trees. The water is cold and sweet, flavoured with minerals from deep in the earth. You cup your hands and drink deeply, feeling the coolness spread through your chest. This spring has served travellers for countless generations. Someone long ago carved a simple cross into the largest oak trunk, and generations of hands have warmed the bark smooth around it. You add your own touch to this living record of human passage, feeling connected to all who have stopped here before you and all who will come after. Refreshed by the spring water, you rejoin the main road and immediately notice something remarkable beneath your feet. The surface here reveals its ancient origins more clearly than anywhere you have walked today. Rectangular stones, each one fitted precisely against its neighbours, emerge from centuries of accumulated earth and wear. You are walking on a Roman road built over 800 years ago, its foundations still solid enough to support the countless travellers who pass this way. Brother Thomas kneels and brushes away loose soil from one of the stones, revealing Latin letters carved into its surface. Most people think Roman roads were simply paved paths, but actually they were marvels of engineering, built in layers. Beneath these surface stones lies a foundation of large rocks, then smaller stones, then gravel, then sand, creating a structure sometimes 4 feet deep. The Romans called this the via strata, the layered way, and these roads were built to last 1,000 years. You run your fingers along the worn grooves carved into the stone by countless cartwheels. The spacing between these ruts tells a story of standardization that most medieval people never realized. Roman carts were built to a specific width, and that width determined the spacing of wheel ruts, which in turn determined the width of roads, which eventually influenced the construction of bridges and gates for centuries after the empire fell. As you continue walking, you pass a section where local villagers have recently made repairs. They have filled gaps between the original Roman stones with smaller rocks and packed earth, using techniques their grandfathers learned from their grandfathers. The knowledge of road maintenance passed down through generations of common people, not through written manuals, but through the practical wisdom of those who understood that their livelihoods depended on keeping these arteries of travel open. Here, a wooden bridge carries the road across a stream that has carved deeper into its banks since Roman times. The bridge timbers are thick oak beams, hewn square with axes, and joined with wooden pegs that swell when wet, to create joints tighter than any nail could provide. Beneath the bridge, you can see the remains of Roman stone pillars that once supported their own crossing, now worn down by centuries of flood and ice. The sound of your footsteps changes as you cross the wooden planks, creating a hollow percussion that echoes off the water below. Small fish dart between the shadows of the bridge supports, and dragonflies hover above the surface where the morning sun has begun to warm the shallows. This stream powers a mill wheel just downstream, where grain from local farms is ground into flour, continuing the cycle of sustenance that keeps these rural communities alive. On the far side of the bridge, you encounter evidence of more recent road maintenance. A crew of local men, organised by the nearest village, has been filling potholes with broken stone and gravel. Their tools are simple but effective: wooden shovels, wicker baskets for carrying materials, and iron hammers for breaking larger rocks into road-sized pieces. The eldest among them, a man whose grey beard speaks of decades of this work, explains their system as he continues placing stones. Each village along this route is responsible for maintaining a specific section of road, usually about 2 miles in length. This responsibility is not imposed by distant authorities, but arises from practical necessity. If their section fails, merchants will find other routes, and the village will lose the income that comes from providing food and shelter to travellers. Most people assume medieval roads were constantly muddy and impassable, but actually, the major routes between monasteries and important cities received careful attention year-round. The difference was that maintenance happened through local cooperation rather than centralised planning, creating a patchwork of techniques and materials that reflected each community's resources and expertise. You watch as the road workers demonstrate their method for setting stones. First, they dig out the damaged area down to solid ground, sometimes 3 feet deep where water has washed away the foundation. Then they build up layers exactly as the Romans did. Large stones at the bottom, smaller stones filling the gaps, gravel packed around everything, and finally the surface stones fitted together like puzzle pieces. The stones themselves come from various sources. Some are salvaged from Roman ruins, their original mortar, chipped away and surfaces cleaned for reuse. Others are quarried from local hillsides, split along natural grain lines using iron wedges and wooden mallets. The best stones are those with flat surfaces and straight edges, but the workers have learned to make do with whatever materials they can find. Brother Thomas shares bread from his travelling pouch with the road crew, and they reciprocate with information about conditions ahead. A section about 3 miles further has been damaged by recent rains, they warn, but it is still passable if you stay to the right side where the foundation remains solid. They also mention that bandits were seen in the area last week, though the local lord's men have since increased their patrols. This informal network of information sharing keeps travellers safer than any written guidebook could. Road workers, merchants, pilgrims and monks all contribute to a constantly updated understanding of which routes are safe and which should be avoided. The knowledge travels as fast as the people who carry it, creating an early warning system that spans hundreds of miles. As you resume your journey, you begin to notice the subtle signs that mark this as a major thoroughfare. Every few hundred yards, you spot small shrines built into roadside walls or niches carved into large rocks. These serve multiple purposes. They provide spiritual comfort to travellers. They mark distances for those who cannot read milestones, and they create landmarks that help people describe directions and locations. The shrine markers reveal something surprising about medieval travel. Each one represents not just spiritual devotion, but also economic investment. Local communities built and maintained these shrines because travellers would stop to pray and often leave offerings. These small donations, accumulated over time, helped fund road maintenance and supported local churches. You pass a section where the original Roman road has been deliberately altered by medieval engineers, where the Roman builders followed their typical straight-line approach, cutting directly up and over a steep hill. Later builders created a gentler route that curves around the hillside. This modification reflects a different understanding of efficient travel. Romans prioritized directness and showcased their engineering prowess, while medieval road builders focused on reducing the strain on pack animals and making routes accessible to wheeled carts loaded with goods. The evidence of this change lies scattered beside the modern path. You can still see sections of the original Roman road, now overgrown with brush and used only by local farmers driving sheep between pastures. The abandoned route climbs at a gradient that would challenge even unladen travellers, while your current path maintains a steady, manageable incline that horses and oxen can navigate while pulling heavy loads. This practical adaptation reveals how medieval communities improved upon Roman infrastructure rather than simply maintaining it. They inherited a vast network of roads, but modified it to serve their own needs, creating hybrid systems that combined Roman engineering expertise with medieval understanding of commerce and transportation. The road surface beneath your feet begins to change as you approach areas where Roman stones have been completely replaced by medieval construction. Here, local builders used a different technique entirely, creating roads from tightly packed gravel held in place by wooden retaining walls. These sections require more frequent maintenance than Roman stonework, but they can be repaired quickly and cheaply using materials available in any rural area. You notice how the road builders have used the natural landscape to their advantage. Where possible, they route the road along ridge lines where drainage is naturally good and the ground stays firm even in wet weather. When the road must cross wet areas, they build it up on foundations of logs and stones, creating raised causeways that remain passable when surrounding fields turn to mud. These causeways represent significant community investment. Building them requires coordinating the labour of dozens of people, from woodcutters who fell the trees to stone masons who shape the foundation blocks. The work must be timed carefully, often taking place during the dry season, when materials can be transported easily and workers can dig foundations without fighting standing water. The bells of Sext ring out across the countryside, marking midday and time for another prayer. You and Brother Thomas stop walking and turn toward the sound, which comes from the monastery you left this morning, now many miles behind you. Other travellers on the road also pause, creating another moment of shared devotion that transforms this working landscape into a place of worship. As you pray, you become aware of all the human effort that has gone into creating and maintaining this road beneath your feet. Every stone was lifted and placed by human hands. Every repair represents someone's decision to invest time and energy in maintaining connections between communities. The road itself becomes a kind of prayer, a physical manifestation of people's desire to reach toward each other across the distances that separate them. The prayer ends, and you resume walking, but something has shifted in your awareness. The rhythm of your footsteps now seems to echo the cadence of the Latin words you just spoke. Left foot falls on pater, right foot on noster, left again on key, creating a physical pattern that keeps the prayer alive in your body even after your voice has fallen silent. Brother Thomas notices your slightly altered pace and nods approvingly. He has walked these roads for 15 years, and his body has learned to weave prayer into movement so seamlessly that he hardly thinks about it anymore. His steps maintain a perfect meter, neither rushing nor dragging, a pace calibrated by decades of experience to carry him exactly where he needs to be when the next bell rings. Most people imagine medieval travellers walked from sunrise to sunset like modern hikers, but actually the monastic schedule created a completely different relationship with distance and time. Your day is divided not by miles to cover, but by prayers to observe. creating natural rest periods that prevent the exhaustion and injury that plague those who push too hard for too long. The science behind this approach would not be understood for centuries, but the monks discovered it through practical experience. Walking continuously for hours stresses joints and muscles in ways that lead to breakdown over time, but walking for 3 hours, then stopping for prayer and brief rest, then walking again, allows the body to recover while maintaining forward progress. Medieval monks could walk day after day for weeks without the injuries that would sideline someone attempting to cover the same distance in fewer days. You feel this wisdom in your own legs as you settle back into the walking rhythm. Your muscles, which had begun to tighten during the extended morning stretch, relax again as fresh blood flows through them. Your breathing deepens and slows, finding the 4-count pattern that will sustain you through the next 3 hours until none, the mid-afternoon prayer. The road ahead stretches straight for nearly a mile, following the crest of a low ridge. This Roman engineering allows you to see your destination monastery clearly now, its bell tower rising above the cluster of buildings that surround it. But instead of quickening your pace in anticipation, Brother Thomas actually slows slightly, adjusting his speed to ensure you arrive at precisely the right moment. This calculation reveals another layer of medieval travel planning. Monasteries operated on rigid schedules, with meals served at specific times and gates closed after certain hours. Experienced travellers like Brother Thomas can judge distance and time so precisely that they arrive exactly when they can be properly received, neither too early to be accommodated nor too late to be admitted. You watch him make these subtle adjustments, reading signs in the landscape that are invisible to you. He notes the angle of the sun, judges the remaining distance by landmarks he has memorized over years of travel, and calculates how the afternoon prayer stop will affect your arrival time. His pace becomes a form of timekeeping more accurate than any mechanical clock. The walking rhythm itself carries deeper meaning that extends beyond mere transportation. Each step becomes a small prayer, a meditation on the relationship between effort and faith. The repetitive nature of the motion frees your mind to contemplate higher things, while your body handles the practical business of moving through space. Medieval monks understood something that modern science has confirmed. Repetitive physical movement triggers the release of natural chemicals that promote calm awareness and spiritual openness. The rhythm of walking, especially when synchronized with breathing and mental prayer, creates an altered state of consciousness that monks called contemplatio, a condition of receptive attention to divine presence. You begin to experience this yourself as the miles pass beneath your feet. Your awareness expands beyond the immediate concerns of foot placement and balance to encompass the entire landscape through which you move. You notice details that would normally escape attention: the way shadows move across distant hillsides, the specific quality of light filtering through different types of clouds, the subtle changes in air temperature as you walk through areas of different elevation and vegetation. This heightened awareness was considered one of the benefits of pilgrimage and religious travel. Monks believed that the combination of physical movement, natural beauty, and spiritual discipline could open the soul to receive insights and revelations that were impossible to achieve within the walls of a monastery cell. The road begins a gentle descent toward a valley where a small stream runs parallel to your route. Here, the Roman engineers faced a challenge that reveals their sophisticated understanding of hydraulics. Rather than building the road directly beside the water, where flooding could wash away the foundation, they placed it just high enough to remain dry while maintaining an easy grade for loaded carts. You can see the evidence of their planning in a series of stone culverts that channel water under the road at regular intervals. These structures prevent erosion by allowing natural drainage patterns to continue flowing even where the road interrupts them. Most people assume Romans simply imposed their roads on the landscape by brute force, but actually they worked with natural water flows and seasonal patterns to create infrastructure that would survive centuries of use. Brother Thomas points out a section ahead where medieval builders made their own hydraulic improvements. They added a stone-lined ditch along the uphill side of the road to catch water running down from the slopes above. This drainage system prevents the road surface from being washed away during heavy rains, extending the life of the pavement and reducing maintenance costs for local communities. As you walk beside this medieval addition to Roman engineering, you notice how the steady sound of water flowing in the ditch creates another layer in the rhythm of your journey. The gentle bubbling and gurgling provides a background percussion that complements your footsteps and breathing, adding to the meditative quality of travel. The stream attracts wildlife, and you spot a heron standing motionless in the shallows, waiting for fish to swim within striking distance. The bird's perfect stillness contrasts with your constant movement, but both represent different forms of patience and attention. The heron waits for the right moment to act, while you maintain steady progress toward a distant goal, each approach requiring its own kind of discipline and faith. A wooden bridge carries the road across a tributary stream, and you pause at its center to look downstream toward a mill wheel turning slowly in the current. The wheel's rotation creates its own rhythm, slower and more stately than your walking pace, but equally hypnotic. Medieval travelers often use such landmarks to judge their progress, knowing that reaching the mill bridge meant they were exactly 2 hours from the monastery gates at normal walking speed. This system of landmark timing worked so well that experienced travelers could navigate accurately even on unfamiliar routes. They learned to read the landscape for clues about distance and travel time, the size and prosperity of villages, the types of crops grown in fields, the style of church architecture, all provided information about location and remaining journey time. The bells of Nun ring out across the valley, their bronze voices calling all who hear them to the 7th hour prayer. You stop walking immediately, even though you are in the middle of the bridge, and turn toward the sound. The wooden planks beneath your feet vibrate slightly as other travelers also stop, creating a moment when the entire road system pauses for prayer. This simultaneous stopping reveals the incredible coordination that bells provided to medieval society. Without clocks or watches, these bronze voices synchronize the activities of thousands of people across hundreds of square miles. Farmers stopped work in their fields, merchants paused their negotiations, travelers halted their journeys, all responding to the same call to prayer that structured their days and unified their communities. As you recite the familiar Latin words, you notice how the prayer itself has a walking rhythm built into its structure. The phrases rise and fall with natural cadences that match human breathing and movement. Medieval monks composed these prayers not just as theological statements, but as practical tools for travelers who would recite them while walking long distances. The prayer ends, and you resume walking with renewed energy. The afternoon rest has refreshed your muscles and cleared your mind. Brother Thomas sets a slightly faster pace now, knowing that the cooling air and downhill grade will make the final approach to your destination easier than the morning's walking. You notice how the quality of light has changed during your brief prayer stop. The sun, now past its peak, casts longer shadows that reveal details in the landscape that were invisible at midday. Rock formations show their true shape. Trees display the full complexity of their branching patterns, and the monastery ahead resolves into clearer detail as shadows define the edges of its buildings. This changing light serves as another natural timekeeper for experienced travellers. Brother Thomas can judge the remaining daylight hours by observing shadow lengths in the colour of sunlight. He knows exactly how much walking time remains before evening prayers, when monastery gates close for the night and travellers must seek shelter wherever they find themselves. The road surface improves as you approach your destination, with more frequent repairs and better maintained drainage systems. This reflects the economic reality that roads receive better care closer to major destinations, where traffic is heavier and local communities have more resources to invest in maintenance. You pass a milestone marking the final mile to the monastery, its carved letters still crisp despite centuries of weather. The stone itself has been recently cleaned and reset, suggesting that the monks send workers out periodically to maintain these markers as acts of service to travellers. Such maintenance work was considered a form of charity, helping strangers navigate safely to shelter and hospitality. The approaching monastery bells begin to ring vespers, the evening prayer, and you realise that Brother Thomas has timed your arrival perfectly. You will reach the gates just as the prayer ends, when the monks will be ready to receive travellers and assign new cells for the night. This precision represents the culmination of a day's walking that was structured not by distance goals or speed targets, but by the ancient rhythm of prayer that transforms mere travel into a form of moving meditation. The monastery gates come into view as the last notes of vespers fade across the valley. But as you approach, you notice something unexpected. A small wooden building sits just outside the main entrance, its door standing open and smoke rising from a chimney. This is your first glimpse of the elaborate hospitality system that makes long-distance travel possible in medieval Europe. Brother Thomas leads you not toward the monastery gates, but toward this modest structure. A lay brother emerges from the doorway, his brown habit marking him as one who has taken vows, but works primarily with secular concerns rather than purely spiritual duties. He greets you with a slight bow and gestures towards stone basins set into the wall beside the entrance. You wash your hands and face in water that has been heated over the fire inside. The warmth feels wonderful against skin that has been exposed to wind and sun all day. The lay brother provides rough linen towels and points toward wooden pegs where you can hang your travelling cloak. These simple amenities, multiplied across thousands of waystations throughout Europe, represent one of medieval civilization's greatest achievements. Most people imagine medieval travellers slept rough under the stars or paid expensive fees at commercial inns, but actually, an extensive network of religious hospitality made long-distance travel accessible to almost anyone with a legitimate purpose. Monasteries, abbeys, and smaller religious houses provided free shelter, food, and care to travellers, funded by donations and agricultural profits from their extensive lands. Inside the guesthouse, you discover a space designed specifically for the needs of religious travellers. Sleeping alcoves line the walls, each furnished with a straw mattress, woolen blanket, and small wooden cross. The central area contains tables and benches where travellers can eat meals and share information about road conditions and destinations. A large fireplace provides warmth and light. while small oil lamps in wall niches allow people to read or write after dark. The lay brother explains the house rules in a voice kept deliberately quiet to maintain the peaceful atmosphere. Travellers may stay up to 3 nights at no charge, longer if they are ill or if weather makes travel dangerous. Meals are provided at the same times as the monastery observes, and guests are welcome to attend services in the main chapel, though it is not required. Silence is maintained after the evening prayer until morning, allowing everyone to rest properly. These rules reveal the sophisticated thinking behind medieval hospitality systems. 3 nights gives travellers enough time to rest thoroughly, repair equipment, and plan their next stage of travel without encouraging people to abuse the system by staying indefinitely. The meal schedule coordinates with monastery operations while ensuring guests receive adequate nutrition. The optional attendance at services respects different levels of religious commitment while maintaining the sacred atmosphere that defines these institutions. You notice other travellers already settled in the guesthouse. An elderly merchant sits at one table, carefully counting silver coins from a leather purse, while his teenage apprentice repairs a torn pack strap. 2 women pilgrims occupy alcoves near the fireplace, their distinctive scallop shell badges identifying them as bound for the shrine of St. James at Santiago de Compostela. A young man with ink-stained fingers writes in a bound manuscript, probably a clerk carrying messages between distant monasteries. This diverse mix of people reveals another truth about medieval travel that contradicts common assumptions. The roads were not dominated by knights and nobles as popular stories suggest, but by ordinary people conducting the practical business of medieval life. Merchants moving goods between markets, pilgrims visiting sacred sites, students travelling to centres of learning, craftsmen seeking new opportunities, and religious personnel maintaining communication networks formed the majority of long-distance travellers. The lay brother brings you bowls of thick soup made from barley, onions, and herbs grown in the monastery garden. The wooden spoons are worn smooth by countless hands, and the pottery bowls show the simple, functional beauty of objects made by monks who understood that even everyday items could reflect spiritual values. The soup tastes of earth and growing things, satisfying in a way that goes beyond mere nutrition. As you eat, you listen to conversations that reveal the information network that connects these waystations. The merchant describes road conditions 3 days south, warning of a bridge washed out by recent floods. The pilgrims share news about a new shrine being built 2 days west, where miraculous healings have been reported. The travelling clerk mentions political tensions in a distant city that might affect trade routes. This constant exchange of information makes waystations far more than simple overnight shelters. They function as communication nodes in a vast network that spreads news, warnings, and opportunities across hundreds of miles. A piece of information shared in a monastery guesthouse might influence decisions made by people who never meet the original source, creating an informal intelligence system that helps coordinate economic and social activities across medieval Europe. After the meal, the lay brother shows you additional facilities that demonstrate the sophistication of monastery hospitality. A separate building contains stables for horses and pack animals, with hay, grain, and clean water provided at no extra charge. Another structure houses a simple but well-equipped workshop where travellers can repair damaged equipment using tools and materials supplied by the monastery. The workshop reveals something remarkable about medieval attitudes toward helping strangers. The monks provide not just the basic necessities of food and shelter, but also the means for travellers to solve practical problems that might otherwise end their journeys. Leatherworking tools for repairing boots and pack straps, metalworking equipment for fixing damaged buckles and fittings, even needle and thread for mending torn clothing, all available to anyone who needs them. Most people assume medieval society was harsh and unforgiving to outsiders, but actually, religious institutions created elaborate systems specifically designed to help strangers succeed in their travels. This hospitality was not just charitable kindness, but practical necessity. The monastery itself depended on travelling merchants for goods it could not produce, on travelling craftsmen for specialised skills, and on travelling religious personnel for communication with the wider church. You discover that the guesthouse contains additional amenities that would surprise modern travellers. A small library holds books specifically chosen for travellers, maps of major routes, guides to shrines and sacred sites, collections of prayers for journey protection, and even practical manuals covering topics like weather prediction and basic medical care for common travel ailments. The books themselves tell a story about medieval literacy that contradicts common assumptions. While most common people could not read, the travelling population included many who could. Merchants needed to read contracts and correspondence. Religious travellers used prayer books and devotional texts. Students and scholars carried their learning between institutions, and government messengers transported written communications. Waystations served as literacy centres where people with different levels of education could share knowledge and assistance. A small infirmary attached to the guest house provides medical care for travellers who fall ill or suffer injuries on the road. The monk who serves as physician combines traditional herbal knowledge with practical experience, treating the specific ailments that commonly afflict people making long journeys. He can treat blisters and foot injuries, provide remedies for digestive problems caused by unfamiliar food and water, and offer medicines for fever and infection. The medical supplies reveal the extent of monastery knowledge networks. Herbs and medicines come from monastery gardens, but also from trade connections that span continents. Some remedies contain ingredients that travel thousands of miles along trade routes, making even remote waystations access points to global knowledge and resources. As evening deepens, you notice how the guest house transforms into a different kind of space. Conversations become quieter and more intimate. The merchant teaches his apprentice to calculate exchange rates between different regional currencies. The pilgrims share devotional readings from a worn prayer book. The travelling clerk writes letters by lamplight, maintaining correspondence networks that connect religious institutions across vast distances. These evening activities reveal another function of waystations that goes beyond simple overnight accommodation. They serve as informal schools where experienced travellers pass knowledge to newcomers, where different types of expertise mix and cross-fertilise, and where the practical wisdom needed for successful long-distance travel accumulates and spreads. You prepare for sleep in your assigned alcove, hanging your few possessions on wooden pegs and spreading your cloak over the straw mattress for extra warmth. The monastery bells ring compline, the final prayer of the day, and the guest house gradually falls silent as travellers settle into rest. But even in the growing quiet, you can hear sounds that remind you of the larger system you have entered. Footsteps in the corridor mark the lay brother making his final rounds, checking that all lamps are safely extinguished and that travellers have everything they need for a comfortable night. From the main monastery buildings come the distant sounds of monks observing their own evening routines, maintaining the spiritual rhythms that support this entire network of hospitality. Outside, you hear other travelers arriving late, their voices kept low as the lay brother greets them and explains the accommodation arrangements. The way station never truly closes, always ready to receive legitimate travelers regardless of the hour. This constant availability represents a remarkable commitment of resources and human energy, supported by the understanding that helping strangers is not just charitable obligation, but practical necessity for maintaining the communication and trade networks that hold medieval society together. Through the small window beside your sleeping alcove, you can see lights in other buildings scattered around the monastery complex, each one representing different aspects of the hospitality system. The kitchen, where tomorrow's meals are already being prepared, the scriptorium, where monks copy manuscripts that will travel to other institutions, the workshops where goods needed by travellers are manufactured and repaired. As sleep begins to claim you, you realise that this single-way station is just one node in a vast network that stretches across the known world, each location connected to all others by the constant movement of people carrying goods, messages, knowledge, and faith along roads that have become arteries of medieval civilization. You wake before dawn to the sound of urgent voices in the corridor outside your alcove. The lay brother is speaking in hushed but serious tones to a group of late arrivals, their words carrying the tension of people who have encountered something dangerous on the road. You listen as they describe what they witnessed. 3 armed men watching travellers from a wooded hillside about 6 miles back, clearly assessing potential targets rather than simply resting beside the road. This news spreads quickly through the guesthouse as other travellers wake and gather around the newcomers. The elderly merchant nods grimly, explaining that he has avoided that particular stretch of road for the past month after hearing similar reports. The pilgrims clutch their wooden crosses and whisper prayers, while the travelling clerk makes notes in his manuscript, preparing to carry this warning to the next monastery along his route. Most people imagine medieval bandits as desperate outlaws driven to crime by poverty, but actually many operated as organised businesses with sophisticated intelligence networks. They studied travel patterns, identified the most profitable targets, and often had agreements with corrupt local officials who received shares of stolen goods in exchange for looking the other way. Some bandit groups controlled specific territories for years, collecting tribute from merchants like unofficial toll collectors. The lay brother brings the conversation back to practical matters. He unrolls a map drawn on parchment and points out alternative routes that avoid the dangerous area. One path adds 2 days to the journey, but stays within sight of villages and farms where help would be available if needed. Another route is shorter, but requires crossing a river where the bridge is currently under repair, forcing travellers to use a ford that becomes dangerous during spring floods. These alternative routes reveal the complex calculations that medieval travellers made every day. Safety, speed, cost, and seasonal conditions all influenced route selection, and experienced travellers carried mental maps that included not just distances and landmarks, but also current information about bandits, weather, political tensions, and infrastructure problems. A journey that looked simple on parchment could require constant adjustments based on changing conditions. Brother Thomas studies the map carefully before announcing his decision. "You will take the longer but safer route," he says, accepting the 2 extra days of travel as the price of avoiding unnecessary risk. This choice reflects the medieval understanding that arriving late was infinitely preferable to not arriving at all, a philosophy that prioritized reliability over speed in ways that modern travelers might find difficult to accept. As you prepare to leave the guest house, the lay brother provides additional protections that go beyond simple route advice. He gives you a small wooden medallion carved with protective symbols and blessed by the monastery's abbot. While this may seem like mere superstition to modern minds, these blessed objects served important psychological functions, helping travellers maintain confidence and courage when facing the very real dangers of medieval roads. More practically, he also provides you with a letter of safe conduct written in Latin and sealed with the monastery's official seal. This document identifies you as travellers under religious protection and requests assistance from any civil or church authorities you might encounter. Most people think medieval travellers were completely vulnerable to arbitrary violence, but actually, an extensive system of legal protections existed for those travelling on legitimate business, especially religious purposes. The letter also serves another crucial function. It establishes your identity as people with institutional connections rather than masterless wanderers. Medieval society was deeply suspicious of people who could not prove their place in the social order, and bandits often avoided targeting travellers who could be traced back to powerful organisations capable of pursuing revenge or justice. You set out from the monastery just as the first light of dawn touches the hilltops, following the safer but longer route toward your next destination. The road immediately feels different from yesterday's journey. Instead of the confident stride of travellers on a well-known path, you and Brother Thomas maintain a more cautious pace, constantly scanning the landscape for signs of danger. This heightened awareness reveals details that escaped your notice during peaceful travel. You notice how certain bends in the road provide perfect ambush sites, where attackers could remain hidden until victims were too close to escape. You observe which hilltops offer commanding views of approaching travellers and which patches of woodland could conceal waiting bandits. Your eyes learn to read the landscape not just for beauty and spiritual inspiration, but for tactical advantages and defensive positions. The weather adds another layer of concern to your journey. Storm clouds build along the western horizon, their dark masses promising rain that could make already challenging travel conditions much worse. Medieval travellers feared weather almost as much as human enemies, knowing that storms, floods, and extreme temperatures killed more people than bandits ever did. Brother Thomas points out signs in the sky and wind that he has learned to read over years of travel. The way clouds build and move reveals not just whether rain is coming, but how severe it might be and how long it might last. The behaviour of birds and animals provides additional weather information, as does the appearance of distant mountains and the quality of light reflecting off various surfaces. This weather wisdom was passed down through generations of travellers, creating an informal meteorological science that helped people make life or death decisions about when to seek shelter and when to press forward. Most people assume medieval travellers were helpless victims of weather, but actually, experienced road users developed sophisticated abilities to predict and prepare for atmospheric conditions. As the morning progresses, you encounter other travellers who have also chosen the safer route, creating an informal convoy that provides mutual protection and shared resources. A family of merchants with 2 loaded carts joins your group, their teenage sons carrying staffs that could serve as weapons if necessary. 2 Franciscan friars travelling to establish a new monastery chapter, add their prayers and blessings to the protective measures surrounding your party. This spontaneous cooperation reveals another truth about medieval travel safety. While dramatic stories focus on individual heroes facing dangers alone, most successful long-distance travel happened in groups that formed naturally along popular routes. These temporary alliances provided security through numbers, while allowing people with different destinations to share protection during overlapping portions of their journeys. The merchants share information about current bandit activities that goes far beyond simple warnings about dangerous locations. They describe the specific techniques being used by different criminal groups, some who pose as injured travelers to lure victims into ambushes, others who set up false roadblocks and demand tolls from legitimate travelers, still others who follow merchant caravans for days before attacking at carefully chosen moments. These details reveal the cat and mouse game that characterized medieval road security. As travelers developed new protective strategies, criminals adapted with new attack methods, creating an ongoing evolution of techniques on both sides. Successful travelers stayed alive not through superior fighting ability, but through superior information and constant alertness to changing criminal tactics. The Franciscan friars contribute their own form of protection through what they call divine providence, but what modern observers might recognize as practical psychology. They lead the group in regular prayers that help maintain morale and group cohesion, while providing natural rest breaks that prevent the exhaustion and poor decision-making that often preceded successful bandit attacks. These prayer stops also serve as intelligence-gathering opportunities. The friars ask everyone to share any unusual sights or sounds they have noticed, creating a collective awareness system that makes it much harder for attackers to approach undetected. What appears to be purely religious practice actually functions as sophisticated group security protocol. As storm clouds move closer, Brother Thomas makes another tactical decision that demonstrates medieval travel wisdom. Rather than seeking shelter and waiting for the weather to pass, he chooses to continue walking, but adjusts the group's formation and pace to minimize weather-related risks. The carts move to the center of the group, where their wheels are less likely to get stuck in mud, while people on foot spread out to avoid bunching together, where a lightning strike could affect multiple victims. The first drops of rain begin to fall, just as you crest a hill that offers a clear view of the surrounding countryside. From this elevated position, Brother Thomas scans the landscape with the practiced eye of someone who has learned to spot trouble before it becomes unavoidable. He points out a group of horsemen moving parallel to your route about a mile away, their behavior suggesting they are shadowing rather than simply traveling in the same direction. This sighting transforms the entire atmosphere of your group. The merchants quietly move their most valuable goods to the center of their carts and cover them with ordinary-looking canvas. The friars begin praying more intensively while maintaining careful watch in all directions. Everyone adjusts their pace to maintain the protective group formation, while avoiding any appearance of panic that might encourage attackers. Most people imagine medieval travelers either fought bandits heroically or submitted helplessly to robbery, but actually, the most effective defense was usually the ability to appear too difficult or unprofitable to attack. Criminal groups operated on cost-benefit calculations, just like legitimate businesses, and they preferred targets that offered maximum reward with minimum risk and effort. The rain intensifies, creating new problems that compete with the potential bandit threat for your attention. The road surface becomes slippery, making footing treacherous for both people and animals. Water begins to collect in low spots, forcing the group to detour around areas where cartwheels might become mired in mud. Visibility decreases as rain obscures distant landmarks and makes it harder to spot potential threats. But the weather also provides unexpected protection. The horsemen who had been shadowing your group disappear from view, probably seeking shelter rather than continuing their surveillance, in conditions that make ambush attacks much more difficult to coordinate. The rain creates natural camouflage that works in favour of travellers who know the road and can continue moving while forcing potential attackers to abandon their plans. Brother Thomas leads the group toward a roadside shrine that offers partial shelter under a stone overhang. This structure, built centuries ago by grateful travellers, represents another layer in the medieval protection system. These shrines served practical as well as spiritual functions, providing emergency shelter and marking safe stopping points where travellers could rest without exposing themselves to ambush. As you huddle under the stone shelter, listening to rain drum on the roof above, the various members of your temporary group share stories about previous encounters with road dangers. The merchant describes being robbed 3 years ago, but notes that the bandits took only money and goods, treating him with surprising courtesy and even providing directions to the nearest settlement where he could seek help. These stories reveal that medieval banditry often followed unwritten rules that limited violence and maintained the long-term viability of criminal operations. Dead travellers could not be robbed repeatedly, and excessive brutality brought unwanted attention from authorities. Many bandit groups operated more like unofficial tax collectors than murderous criminals, taking portions of travellers' wealth while leaving enough for people to continue their journeys and return with more goods to steal later. The storm passes as quickly as it arrived, leaving the air clean and the landscape refreshed. Steam rises from wet stone and earth as sunshine breaks through the dispersing clouds. Your group emerges from the shrine shelter and resumes travel, but the shared experience of weathering danger together has created bonds that will influence the rest of your journey toward whatever challenges and protections await along the road ahead. The afternoon sun breaks through the last of the storm clouds as your group approaches the final monastery of today's journey. The shared experience of weather and potential danger has woven you together into something more than strangers who happen to choose the same road. The merchants walk more slowly now, no longer focused solely on their own cargo. The friars include everyone in their prayers, not just their own order. Even the quiet travelling clerk has shared his knowledge of safe routes and reliable waystations. This transformation reveals perhaps the deepest truth about medieval travel. It was never really about moving from one place to another. The roads themselves became communities, temporary but real, where people from different walks of life learned to depend on each other. The journey changed the travellers as much as it moved them through space. Brother Thomas slows his pace as the monastery bells become audible in the distance. After 2 days of walking, his internal clock remains perfectly calibrated to arrive exactly when the gates will be open and the guest master ready to receive new visitors. This precision represents the culmination of everything you have experienced. The careful attention to prayer times that structured each day, the detailed knowledge of road conditions that ensured safe passage, the understanding of hospitality systems that guaranteed shelter and sustenance. You pass the final milestone before the monastery, its carved stone surface weathered but still legible after centuries of marking distances for countless travellers. The numbers mean less now than they did when you began this journey. What matters is not how many miles you have covered, but how the rhythm of walking has aligned your body with the natural cycles of prayer and rest. How the shared challenges of the road have opened your awareness to both danger and divine protection. The monastery gates stand open, their heavy oak timbers framing a view of the peaceful courtyard beyond. But before entering, you pause to look back along the road you have travelled. The path stretches behind you like a thread connecting this moment to all the experiences that brought you here. The Roman stones worn smooth by generations of feet, the carefully maintained bridges spanning streams and valleys, the shrines where countless pilgrims stopped to pray, the waystations that provided shelter and safety to strangers. This backward glance reveals the road's true nature. It is not simply infrastructure for moving goods and people, but a living system that embodies medieval civilization's highest ideals. The cooperation required to maintain roads, the hospitality offered to strangers, the shared information that kept travelers safe, the coordination of activities through prayer bells, all of these represent human beings choosing to connect with each other across the distances and differences that could just as easily divide them. The guest master emerges from the monastery to greet your group, his movements unhurried and welcoming. He has performed this ritual thousands of times, receiving travellers who arrive carrying dust and rain and worry, transforming them back into rested, fed, peaceful human beings ready to continue their journeys. His presence represents the institutional memory that makes the entire system possible, the accumulated wisdom of generations who understood that helping strangers was not charity, but necessity. As you wash your hands in the stone basin beside the gate, the cool water carries away more than just the physical grime of travel. The simple ritual marks a transition from the alertness and caution required on the road to the peace and security available within sacred walls. Your shoulders relax as tension you did not know you were carrying dissolves into the courtyard's protected atmosphere. The other members of your temporary road family undergo the same transformation. The merchants unload their carts with obvious relief, their valuable goods finally safe from weather and bandits. The friars exchange formal greetings with their brother monks, their shared vows creating instant bonds that transcend the differences between communities. The travelling clerk presents his letters of introduction, connecting this monastery to the vast network of correspondence that holds medieval Christianity together. Inside the guest house, you discover travellers who arrived earlier, their own stories adding to the tapestry of movement and connection that defines these roads. A group of pilgrims bound for Rome shares news from the north. A master craftsman travelling to examine cathedral construction techniques describes innovations spreading slowly from monastery to monastery. Two merchants debate the relative merits of different trade routes, their knowledge accumulated over decades of successful journeys. These conversations reveal the road's function as more than transportation infrastructure. They serve as the nervous system of medieval civilization, carrying not just people and goods, but ideas, techniques, artistic styles, religious practices, political news, and technological innovations. Every traveller becomes a messenger, consciously or unconsciously, spreading the accumulated knowledge of human communities across vast distances. As evening deepens and the guest house settles into its quiet rhythms, you reflect on everything the road has taught you. The importance of patience, as prayer times structured progress more powerfully than speed ever could. The value of cooperation, as shared dangers created bonds between strangers. The wisdom of preparation, as knowledge of routes, weather and safety measures meant the difference between successful arrival and dangerous failure. But perhaps most importantly, you have learned to see travel itself as a form of prayer in motion. Each step became a meditation, each mile an offering, each encounter with other travelers an opportunity to practice the charity and mutual aid that medieval Christianity held as highest ideals. The road transformed mere physical movement into spiritual journey, making pilgrims of everyone who walked its length with proper attention and reverence. The monastery bells ring compline, their bronze voices calling all within hearing to the final prayer of the day. You join the other travellers in reciting the familiar Latin words, but now they carry additional meaning. The phrases that yesterday were simply ritual have become expressions of genuine gratitude for safe passage, real pleas for continued protection, heartfelt appreciation for the hospitality that made your journey possible. As you settle into your sleeping alcove for the night, you listen to the sounds that mark a way station after dark. Quiet conversations as travellers share final pieces of road wisdom before sleep. The scratch of pen on parchment as someone records the day's experiences in a journal or letter. The soft footsteps of lay brothers making their rounds, ensuring that all guests have what they need for comfortable rest. Outside, you can hear night sounds that connect this protected space to the larger world. Wind moving through trees, distant church bells, marking the hours in other communities. The occasional sound of late travellers arriving to seek shelter. These sounds remind you that the road continues beyond the monastery walls, carrying other people toward their own destinations, maintaining the constant circulation that keeps medieval civilization alive and connected. Tomorrow you will rise before dawn and resume your own journey, joining the endless stream of travellers who have walked these paths for centuries before you and will continue walking them for centuries to come. You will carry with you not just the physical items in your pack, but the accumulated wisdom of the road, the knowledge of how to read weather signs and route conditions, the understanding of how prayer and movement can become a single practice, the appreciation for the complex systems of hospitality and mutual aid that make long-distance travel possible. But tonight, as sleep begins to claim you, you rest in the peace that comes from being exactly where you need to be, when you need to be there. Surrounded by the protection that generations of faithful people have built into these networks of road and shelter and spiritual practice, the rhythm of your breathing slows to match the ancient pace of prayer and rest that has sustained travellers on these roads since the first monks began walking between distant monasteries, carrying the light of faith and learning across the distances that connect and separate all human communities. The road sleeps around you, but it never truly rests. Even now, other travellers move through the darkness, guided by stars and prayer, and the accumulated wisdom of all who have walked these paths before them. In the morning, you will join that eternal pilgrimage once again, adding your own footsteps to the countless millions that have worn these stones, smoothed and kept these ancient routes alive through the simple act of continuing to walk them. One prayer, one step, 1 mile at a time. Thank you for joining us on this peaceful journey through medieval roads and the rhythms that guided travellers between sacred destinations. If you enjoyed our work and are still awake, check out our other content exploring the quiet moments and forgotten wisdom of history. And if you have fallen asleep, rest well and enjoy the campfire.